As autumn eases its way into the tranquil northeast corner of Connecticut, it is a time to enjoy the last traces of summer and embrace the oncoming fall. Soon the leaves will change, the temperature will drop, and summer will be a memory. During this time of reflection, one of the region's landmarks also embraces the past when Lime Rock Park welcomes vintage racing cars to the historic Festival 35. Lime Rock Park in beautiful western Connecticut, one of the most popular and picturesque racetracks in the entire Northeast. And we're here today for Lime Rock Park Historic Festival 35. Hi everybody, I'm Bill Stevens, and what a great event we have for you today. Once a year, it's all about history and tradition, when some of the most historically significant race cars in the whole world come here to compete on Lime Rock's 1.5-mile road course. We're going to show you a lot of the cars, speak to the owners and racers and some of the VIPs who have made this event so popular. So, if you're ready to go, let's throw that green flag. Heading out to the racetrack right now, a group of vintage race cars that compete in the Group 1 category. They're described as road-going sporting cars, but as you'll see, they have had a lot of race prep. It's a heady mix, quite a variety of automobiles. In fact, you're about to see a very rare Ferrari hit the Lime Rock Road Course.
And my car is a Ferrari 250 Interim 1959. Well, there were only 7 of these made. So it's a very rare car, and it's called Interim because it was the transition car between the 250 TDF, Tour de France, and then the very famous short wheelbase. And so most people, when they look at it, they think it's a short wheelbase, but if you look, there's a quarter window, which makes the car a slightly bit longer than the short wheelbase, and that's the distinguishing characteristic. It's very easygoing, very balanced, takes the turns very well. The back comes out a little bit and gives you a little fun when you're going through the corners. We just had the engine rebuilt because I've campaigned for over a dozen years, and the engine was getting tired, so now it's got some real pep. It's all about the cars, really. There shouldn't be any room for ego for the drivers. These are great cars. They've survived this long. They're feats of engineering and beautiful body design, so we're here to exercise them and give them the right to do what they should do.
One of the cars competing in Group 1 is an MGA, car number 76, driven by Dave Nicholas. When Dave was just a teenager, he formed a racing group with a bunch of his friends called Park.
Park Boys started 60 years ago. There were just a bunch of teenage guys. We didn't really know each other, but we all fell in love with sports cars, with racing cars. And so we got together and we met each other, and we decided we would form a club. At that time, the club in the world was the British Automobile Racing Club, BARC. Well, we're from Binghamton, New York, so why not have a Binghamton Automobile Racing Club? That's it. I went on to, run Trans Am and the Camel GT series and won a lot of races. Then I kind of stopped for a while, and when I came back, I just came back to my roots and said, let's go with another MG.
It's been a roller coaster ride for Dave this weekend, starting with a breakdown on the way to the track, followed by mechanical problems in his first race. But the satisfaction of competition and his sense of humor keep Dave on track.
The G meter, I'm from Honolulu, and we have a hula girl bolted to the dash of the car. And I can actually tell going through a corner, when she begins to sway a little bit, I know I'm going fast enough. If she's only this much, I've got to go quicker through the corner. The bad thing is, though, is if we're on a long enough straight, her skirt comes up.
In Group 1, Rich Malumian Jr. dominated, driving his number 347 Austin Healey to wins in all 4 races. Dave Nicholas captured a pair of 4th place finishes. For our next closed wheel category, we switch to the splendid sedans of Group 3 and one remarkable race car.
Well, I bought this Volvo off of a used car lot in Mamaroneck, New York, right on Route 1. Way back in 1963, I was 18 years old. I took this car to a driver's school right here at Lime Rock when I was 19 years old. The British Sports Car Owners Association allowed me to run, even though I was technically underage. They let me run. And over the next 5 years, I graduated finally to SCCA racing, and we ran this car at Sebring and in the SCCA runoffs at Daytona in 1969. After which, the car was retired and ended up sitting in a field. I was going to do something with it, but I never did. There it sat. But fortunately, the motor had been put in the garage.
And so, there the Volvo sat for decades, until Ron's son Nick came to the rescue.
I had always wanted to rebuild that car because I'd heard, so many stories about it. It's what I grew up with. We finally towed it out of the field in upstate New York, and I had to replace the rocker panels, the floors, some other bits of body work, and I had to work. I spent over an hour with my paint supplier getting that green just tinted just perfectly.
He did such a good job. When I get behind the wheel of that car now, I completely forget that I'm 73 years old. I could be 25 again for all I know when I'm driving that car. A man couldn't ask for a better son than this guy right here. I gotta say that.
Taking a look at the results in Group 3, Jake Clapp and his 1970 Datsun 240Z took the first 3 races, with Scott Hughes piloting his 1972 BMW CSL to the win in race 4. Coming up next on the schedule will be the cars taking part in the Formula Junior World Tour, including some of the most unique open-wheel race cars on the planet. Stay with us.
The Lime Rock Historic Festival 35 is being brought to you by Rod & Supply. We don't just sell them, we race them. MRT Performance, for performance car parts and servicing. And by Cool Tools, hose assembly and hardline sealing solutions.
This portion of the Lime Rock Historic Festival 35 is presented by Rod & Supply. Welcome back to Lime Rock Park. Right now we're going to have a chance to talk to the chairman of this incredible event, Murray Smith, and you wear more than just one hat, I hear.
No, I wear one hat, that's all, but I'm the chairman of the event, which means I have ultimate control over the cars that run, how we run them, and that's based on experience of what the cars did last year or what I think they can do. If we have something special, obviously, we change it a bit. This year I had Formula Junior, their Diamond Jubilee Tour, so we did 2 grids of juniors.
Heading for the racetrack right now, Formula Juniors. Some of these cars will be competing in the Formula Junior World Tour. This is a class that was established in 1958 by Count Giovanni Lorani. It was an entry-level class. Drivers would be able to build and race these cars very inexpensively. Now, Ray Malik is in one of these automobiles, and his dad revolutionized this category way back in the day.
My dad wasn't one for following fashion, so whilst other people were building cars that tended to replicate a small Grand Prix car, he was confident that a front-engine rear-wheel drive layout was the right way to go, and most importantly, it was a very inexpensive way of going racing. So my dad designed the chassis, and then he would sell these chassis and enable young drivers and engineers to build their own race cars. They're a wonderful car to go racing with, and their performance usually surprises people because they look different, but they go like hell.
What makes the Malik even more remarkable is that despite its low profile, it's still a good fit.
It's snug, but my dad was the same sort of size. He was 6'4", I'm 6'3", so it was built for big guys. So there's not a lot of room in there, but it's actually very comfortable and snug.
Ray had no problem squeezing into the car and dominating Group 2, winning all 4 of the races here at Lime Rock. One of the cars competing in Group 2 has a very strong connection to the racing scene here in the Northeast. It was built by Giacomo Giacomo, who also raced in NASCAR, and a lot of people don't know that car number 6 was built by him, a Formula Junior nicknamed the Giaco Special.
It is American history, and I'm really proud to have it. I wanted to buy a Formula Junior, and my Kiwi mates here who are racing their Lolas and their Geminis and all the other bits and pieces said, look at this, it was online, and we looked at the photos and we said, we've not seen anything like this. It looks sort of like a little Indy car, it's a bit speedway midget, stretched,
and it just looked pretty, and it was a Fiat engine, Morris Minor suspension, weird stuff, and it was only one made, number one, and so I thought, I'm going to buy it. Jocko Maggiacomo was an American dirt track speedway racer in the 50s, and he figured he could build a Formula Junior racer to take on the Italians and the English. And he really thought it was going to be right on the front row. He had Jim Haynes, and then Sam Posey bought it. Sam was sitting in it yesterday, or buy it yesterday, and reminiscing, said it was the worst car he'd ever driven. But you know, that's good. It's got history.
Well, Neil is a Kiwi all the way from New Zealand, and he had a special visitor here at Lime Rock Park. Take a look at this picture. The gentleman you see there has some DNA in the race car. That is Jocko Maggiacomo Jr. Worked on that race car, helped his dad race it back in the day, and he came here to Lime Rock Park to get a close look at it.
Just touching it with my hands to feel it gives you a vibration, an impact of back then, and trying to catch up with reality today. So it's interesting. There's things on this car that I helped play with when I was that young, because I was around 12 years old then. But by then I was advanced in machinery and working and building and even welding the aluminum. I did a terrible job welding it, but I did weld on this car, the tunnel and some other parts. I learned how to weld, but mostly I burned holes in it. My dad got mad and he'd always holler at me, and then he'd have to weld it and pound it and grind it and get it back to normal. But to see a car like this, it brings back a lot of memories, yeah, a lot of fond memories.
The Jocko and many of the cars here this weekend rely on suspensions designed for nimble handling and low lap times. And there is a key component for that kind of performance.
Rod end supply, we manufacture a variety of rod ends in a variety of sizes. Our primary premium rod end is a rod end that has an injection molded race. Nylon fiber is the material which we've developed, which is a combination of nylon infused with fiberglass, some other chemicals, as well as lubricants. That particular part does not beat out like a Teflon line part does. Also, you don't need to lubricate it, and you don't need to clean it. We have two types of steel: chromoly steel 4130 that's heat treated. We also have a C1045 steel, which is we consider more of a mild steel. And we also have aluminum, although I don't recommend running aluminum on road race cars. We do everything from SpaceX rocket ship rod ends to very small 540 thread rod end for Disney and their animatronics. And then of course we have racing that gets involved in between those sizes.
We still have more vintage racing to come, and we'll check out the next generation of Formula Juniors with the engines moved to the rear. Stay tuned for more of the Lime Rock Historic Festival 35. This portion of the Lime Rock Historic Festival 35 is presented by AP Laser. Welcome back to Lime Rock Park. The Group 2 cars, the Formula Juniors, were born in 1958 as front-engine cars, but soon the infidels worked their way in. Rear-engine cars like this 1962 Stangalini Delfina, one of only 3 ever built. And the rear-engine cars, they ushered in a whole new era in the Formula Junior category.
The car is a 1963 Lotus 27. Based on the Lotus 25 Grand Prix car, and then also uses the prototype for the Lotus 32. It is the first of the first of the Chapman monocoque car. Consists of two bent pieces of aluminium with a bulkhead at the front and a bulkhead at the rear. It was the very last, obviously the last of the Lotus cars, and probably one of the last of the cars. I mean, mine got delivered directly into Australia from the factory, but really not until halfway through the 63 season. And in fact, most of its life was spent with a 1.5 litre twin cam in it, racing actually in the Australian Grand Prix and the Tasman Series. So it has raced with the likes of Jimmy Clark in the same race, but it's been brought back to the junior specifications, which is how they were all sold, and I've been racing it since 2013.
The Formula Junior World Tour began in early 2016 and is scheduled to end in the summer of 2018. It has visited 4 continents and some of the world's most famous racetracks.
The setting here at Lime Rock is absolutely magnificent. It's one of the finest settings you'll find anywhere in the world, with the trees, the hills and what have you. And the track is very, very good. We love it, and it particularly suits these juniors because we like to slide them around a bit, and this is just the place to do it.
Martin Bullock's Lotus took the first 2 Group 6 races here in Lime Rock, and Joe Colasacco's Stangalini Delfino was victorious in both of Monday's races. Well, to many people, including me, this 1960 Ferrari 250 GT short wheelbase is three-dimensional automotive art. Well, there's an honored guest here at Lime Rock this weekend who's become a legend with his two-dimensional automotive art.
I've been doing posters and artwork since I was 5 or 6 years old. Went to the Art Center College of Design in Los Angeles and then began getting involved with Ferraris and just sports cars in general. And when I was in my late 20s, I was an instructor at the Jim Russell Driving School in California for a while, and then I went to work for Road and Track and worked for them for over 30 years. I like to draw tight drawings and then kind of be as loose as I can with the paint. They're watercolor and gouache, so you've got to be pretty tight with the watercolors. You got to know exactly where you're putting it because you can't erase it. And unlike oils, you can wipe the slate clean and start over again if you make a mistake. And they are a cross between photorealism and very loose painting.
With several hundred entries in the historic festival, there are many interpretations of racing style and appearance. Thanks to modern laser technology, there's a unique way to individualize both race cars and street machines.
So the cool thing about lasers is they allow you to mark any material as long as it's safe to you in the machine. You can cut a lot of different materials as well. Really, your mind's your only limitation. If you can think up something, the AP laser will do it. You can basically just take any image, any file, create that, and put it onto almost any material. Lasers and powder coat is actually really cool. With the powder coat, obviously, you can apply that coating to most metals, materials, stuff like that. And then with the laser, you're removing the powder coat material, revealing the underneath material, so you get that really, really nice contrast. So again, just a custom one-of-a-kind vehicle. What we're looking to do is get into the fiber market. Fiber laser allows you to do metal cutting and metal marking. Right now with our AP laser, we can hit pretty much any material, like I said, but just no metal cutting. Metal cutting will allow you to take it to that next step and really be able to personalize any part of the vehicle.
Stay with us for more of the Lime Rock Historic Festival 35, because when we come back, we'll fire up Group 5 with a field full of ground-pounding big block behemoths. We're back in a moment. This portion of the Lime Rock Historic Festival 35 is presented by MRT Performance. Welcome back to Lime Rock Historic Festival 35. Everywhere you look here this weekend, you see unbelievable vintage race cars. This is a real deal 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO. And let's talk about Group 4. Nicknamed Eric's Delight after Eric Broadley, the man who founded Lola. And here at Lime Rock this weekend, one of the most significant Lolas on 4 wheels.
This is a Lola Mark I. It's the very first Lola ever really made for production. And Eric Broadley became the most prolific race car manufacturer out there. So this is the first production car they ever made. They made 35, and this is number 30. The lines of the car are magnificent. The feel of the car is lovely. It's a balanced car. It's an amazingly well-handling car, and I love beating up on the Lotus 11s, which is the history of how Lola got going because Eric Broadley was upset with Colin Chapman, and he needed a car that would beat the Lotus 11s. So it went out a champion car from a champion make in all categories, probably the greatest of historic racing manufacturers.
Well, much to Michael's dismay, a trio of Lotuses driven by Craig Chima, Graham Edelman, and Dave Handy took race wins in Group 4, with Tom Grudovich's Ginetta G4 also taking a solo race win. Oh, I'm in my happy place now. Yep, Group 5, Skip's Nightmare. These are the big bore bad boys, the miscellaneous Grand Touring cars. This Corvette, driven by somebody from the West Coast? Nope. Midwest? East Coast? Wrong. Someone from the old sod. Blimey.
I'm from England. I was born in England. My parents were born from I don't know where. I've been into American cars since '66 when I went to California with my parents, and my uncle was a drag racer. I saw it, I was 13, I go, well, I got to get involved in this, and I've had a love affair with American cars and Corvettes especially ever since. It's quite high horsepower, and it is quite a handful because there's no real straights to have a rest. So you're pretty much on it all the time. I'd love to have it all shiny and painted and everything else. Unfortunately, there's no spare cash to have it painted. So we spent half a day and painted it a few weeks ago. Well, in hot rod satin black.
Bernie's low-buck DIY approach to racing extends to every aspect of his car.
Problem with Corvettes is the mirror they made you to sit on top of the dash, and it's hopeless. So I got a mirror from an Austin Healey, wired it up last time, but it keeps vibrating too much. So I've sort of Home Depot'd it, so it's reasonably good.
In Group 5, Jim Hamblin's Porsche 911 took a hat trick of wins, with only Jack Bush's Jaguar preventing a clean sweep. Bernie Chodoff had a trio of top 10 results, but he missed the final race because he had to fly home to England. In economy class, of course. There was a lot of vintage Detroit iron in Group 5, and many modern muscle cars were on the grounds as well. Proof that today's historic fans enjoy their performance with engineering and style.
MRT is a true American customizer, modifier, and aftermarket product manufacturer. And we cover products that range from Jeeps to Mustangs to Camaros, Corvettes, even Lamborghini products. We're a company run by enthusiasts for enthusiasts, so we will address the product needs on every level for the customer. If the parts aren't available, in many cases, we will fabricate and manufacture them in-house. So we have skilled craftsmen in metalworking, whether it be tube, flat stock, square stock, and special effects for finish, whether it be paint or hydrographics. We really want to get in the head of the customer, understand what they want in their vehicle, and then our job is to execute the delivery of that desire with the best materials, the best process, and the best value. MRT has been in business for nearly 20 years and thousands of satisfied customers. When your project is ready, give us a call.
The Lime Rock Historic Festival 35 is being brought to you by AP Laser, leading the way. Race Gas, get more out of your engine. Rod End Supply, we don't just sell them, we race them. And by MRT Performance, for performance car parts and servicing.
This portion of the Lime Rock Historic Festival 35 is presented by Motorsports Fuel and Equipment, makers of Race Gas. Welcome back to Lime Rock Historic Festival 35. And boy, is it a pleasure to be standing next to this gentleman, a former race car driver, but maybe more importantly, he is the owner of Lime Rock Park, Skip Barber. And Skip, I know this event is so important to you.
And it's our favorite event, everybody's favorite event, I think, of the year, certainly mine.
What do you think it is about the event that just gets everybody so enchanted?
I think it's the fact that there's so many different activities. I love going to Monterey every year, but all those things are spread around, and here there's something going on all the time, but it's all from or at the track.
And how about a racetrack with no grandstands?
We're so proud of that. I mean, this is really a park that happens to have a racetrack going through it. And we'll never have grandstands. This is all about picnics and blankets.
Skip, this isn't the only event, obviously, here at Lime Rock Park. It's a pretty busy place.
That's an understatement. We have 3 or 4 major events a year, but basically the track is busy every day except Sundays, which is a whole nother story.
While taking in the sights, sounds, and scenery here at Lime Rock, it's impossible not to notice a large white tent in the paddock. And inside are 5 significant cars owned by the Historic's honored collector, Bruce Meyer.
I'm a California hot rodder by birth, and I have an expression, you're never too old to have a happy childhood. My interest is really in performance cars and race cars. The Corvette is a 1960 Briggs Cunningham car, which was the very first time Corvettes ever ran at Le Mans. And he took over 3 cars, and they did very well. They won their class and came in 8th overall, and this is one of those of the team, and it's just a delight. It is the rarest and really the most original, because it has the original body and the original wheels, And then after they discovered that it was a Cunningham Corvette, Briggs Cunningham was still alive, and he introduced him to Frank Burrell, and Frank Burrell had the original seats, the original dash, so all the parts on the Corvette are original. With regard to the Cobra, when I found the Cobra, I found it in France. Still had the original body, and the chassis had never been bent. But I just couldn't believe I'd come across CSX 2001, which is basically the first production car, and this is one done by Ed Hugas. So this was an East Coast car. It never had even been to the West Coast until I brought it in. The big one is a Bentley, and again, it has some Le Mans connection in the fact that Bentley ruled Le Mans in the late 20s, just dominated. And they had these big 4.5 liter and 6 liter Bentleys. It was the 4.5s, and they were my favorite. So to find an original bodied 4.5 Van den Plas like we have here is a real rare item. The car has great pedigree. It's never been rebodied. So that's the particular interest for that car, because I'm pretty particular on it, making sure things are authentic and like they ought to be. And that Bentley checks every box. The two hot rods we brought, we thought were really seminal hot rods. The black one is the Doane Spencer Roadster. That is the oldest hot rod in existence. That was started in the late 30s, and Doane went off to war and continued in the late 40s. But it's always considered kind of the holy grail, with many, many firsts. It has that split Duval windshield, a Zeed frame. The front end is Bulldog, kind of narrowed. I mean, there are so many of the current great hot rods that are modeled after this car. So this is kind of one of the most beloved hot rods in the world. With regard to the Pearson Brothers Coupe, I actually chased that car and did our research and found the car was still running at Bonneville and at the Dry Lakes. And when we took it all apart, we found it was, again, the original chassis, original body. That car is exactly how it was. It was chromed, it was painted. The Pearson Brothers said they invented candy apple paint when they built the car, who knows. But it's just a really significant car. Every single car we have, we drive, we race, we put on the track. They're not just trailer queens. You know, I was just saying, if you're the last man on earth and you could have world's greatest car, who cares if you can't share it? So for us, bringing them here, sharing them with all the East Coast fans who've perhaps not seen some of these West Coast cars, it's a real joy for us. So we're just getting a lot out of this.
Those 5 classics are just a fraction of Bruce Meyer's overall collection, and his appreciation for variety is shared by our featured driver in Group 7. What could be better than racing a classic race car here at the Lime Rock Historic Festival? How about racing 2 of them? Yeah, Peter Giddings in this beautiful Lancia and racing that Alfa Romeo. And we asked him what it's like to race these 2 entirely different race cars.
This is an Alfa Romeo Tipo C 8C35, and was driven by greats like Nuvolari. It's kind of interesting because Alfa's first attempt at independent suspension, a transaxle, magnesium, fully under trade. Suffice to say that when Tazio Nuvolari drove the prototype, he got out, he said, "I'm not going to ride this car, it's too dangerous." The Lancia is fairly new to me. I've had it for 2 years, but we spent 2 years fixing the engine. The gearbox is totally back to front, and it's a 5-speed. So much so that I'm tempted to write the gear positions and numbers on my visor, but that wouldn't work. So you'll notice that I have them glued to the dashboard so that I can remind myself.
Alfa Romeos from the 1930s dominated the winner's circle in Group 7, with Peter Giddings driving his Tipo C8 C35 to 3 wins, and Peter Greenfield's 1933 8C 2600 capturing the honors in the remaining race. Whether in the pits or in the paddock, the car's performance comes down to one crucial factor: its fuel.
These race engines are incredibly sensitive. Even ones that aren't necessarily stressed out per se are very sensitive, and octane requirements are very important. On the vintage side, for a lot of the customers that we have that don't have hardened valve seats, you want to make sure you're using a leaded fuel or a lead substitute in your racing fuel to ensure that you're not damaging those valve seats. Race gas, in order to replicate racing fuel, has to do 3 things. It has to increase the octane, obviously. It has to increase the chemical energy of the base fuel, and it has to increase the chemical oxygen of the base fuel. Now, why is that important? If you have high octane and low chemical energy, you're effectively lean at wide open throttle, and you're going to damage your motor. If you have high octane and low chemical oxygen, not all the fuel is going to burn in the power stroke. Some will burn in the exhaust stroke, and you'll either melt a piston or you'll damage your valves. And when we set about building the product, that was the goal of the product, to do those three things specifically.
One enjoyable aspect of Lime Rock's Historic Festival 35 is that you can drive away in a classic as long as you bring your checkbook. It will be auction time when we return. This portion of the Lime Rock Historic Festival 35 is presented by Cool Tools. Welcome back to Lime Rock Historic 35 here at Lime Rock Park. Well, weather's turned a little wet and ugly on us, but it has not dampened the enthusiasm at this event. In fact, right next door is the Dragone Auction, a fabulous selection of beautiful classic cars up for bids. Many of them not like this rusted out basket case. Anyway, earlier we had a chance to talk to George Dragone about this event.
Who get $150,000 here? 25, who get 35, 35, 30.
We brought 60 cars and one motorcycle to be auctioned off. Hopefully we're going to sell them all. Some of the outstanding cars that are here, we have 3 cars that were built by George Barris. Our oldest car is a 1903 Cadillac, and the newest one is a 80s Ferrari. Well, we tried to have a mix of different cars, so from classic era cars to sports cars, Porsches, you know, whatever we think is hot today, you know, we think that would be a sellable entity at Lime Rock.
114 years old.
And lots of people that have come here didn't expect to see these cars that are for sale. They'd be able to buy, you know, a classic car or a sports car. They just came here to see the race, but now it puts a whole different idea in their head. They'd be able to buy something.
56. Yep. 55,000. Got it. 60 now. At $60,000 here, going to be 55. Asking $76,000. You got it. Sold in the front row. $76,000. Sold. Another one. Sold.
When the auction concluded, 85% of the cars up for bid found new owners, generating over $3.7 million in sales. The top seller was the 1931 Cadillac V16 Lancefield convertible Victoria that hammered for an impressive $577,500. Even though the Connecticut monsoon continues, dozens of classic car owners have brought their beautiful rides down here to the Concours on the Samposi Strait, and we had a chance to talk to some of the owners about their cars.
This was a car ordered especially in Paris in 1961 by a guy named Paul Viard, who was the lawyer for the Ferrari importer for France. And it is a 61 competition short wheelbase, but with a one-off alloy Farina body. Always a road car, never raced. Spent its whole life pretty much in France.
And what kind of condition was it in when you acquired it?
Well, it had been sold to a fellow in Holland who was basically a drug dealer. And he tried to make it look like a different car, but it was all there, and we found some original pictures from 1961 of the car as it was and put it back the way it did when it was new.
You must be pretty proud of it.
It's a lovely driving car.
Dean, 2 fabulous Jaguars. I mean, just outstanding cars. Tell us the story about your 64.
The 64 car is very special to me because the previous owner had passed, and it left to his family. And so we obtained the car and we finished the car, something that everybody wanted to see finally get done. It's all original colors. It's a matching numbers car. It has, you know, just great bones, no rust ever. All the numbers are right. The transmission has a hard top, so it's a very special car. It took us about a year and a half to do.
And to Jaguar aficionados, these Series 1 cars, they are the Jag E-Type to have.
Oh yeah, especially the 3.8 liter cars, because the true guys that know Jaguars, the 3.8s are so much more fun to drive.
The one that's next to it is breathtaking as well. And this is a tribute car. Explain that.
Well, I did that car for a very good friend, a very special customer, and he wanted a serious street car. We got a little carried away. We did everything we could think of on that car. It has suspension options and the motor's totally done. And it's a tribute car. And if you look at it, the name of it's called Enzo Says, because Enzo Ferrari was quoted as saying that the Jaguar E-Type is the most beautiful car he'd ever seen. He said the only thing wrong with it doesn't say Ferrari on it.
In keeping with the inclusive nature of the Lime Rock Festival, the Concours was open to all sorts of cars, even hot rods.
So this is my Studilac tribute car. Bill Frick from Bill Frick Motors back in the 50s made a car called the Studilac. It was a Cadillac engine in a Studebaker. And what I've done is I've recreated that by taking the Cadillac CTS-V LS2 engine, 400 horsepower engine, and dropping it into a 1953 Studilac. We thought that the original Ray Loewy design was quite handsome, and we didn't want to change it much, but we wanted to make some subtle body modifications to make it ours and to make it look even more streamlined and fast.
You know, you're surrounded by Ferraris and Maseratis and Jaguars, but your car seems to get as much attention as any of them.
Well, you know, I appreciate that people like the car. I bring it out here because it makes people happy, and it's certainly a lot of fun to drive, and it's a lot of fun to show.
It's a 1940 Ford Deluxe Coupe. I've had this car for about 8 years. It was in pretty good condition, not like you see it now, but respectable condition, I would say.
And other than the engine, you've stayed pretty old school with this car. Not a lot of body modifications, things like that to it.
No, I wanted to keep it stock as possible. I removed the chrome off the side. The original Spears is pinstriped to break up the line a little bit, but I wanted it to look virtually stock. So when somebody looked at it, they're looking at a 1940 Ford until they step up and they find out it's not as it came from the factory.
It's a dumb question for a hot rodder, but I'll bet you drive it a lot.
I drive it every day. And I drove it out here today in the rain. And I left in the rain, and I'll be going home in the rain.
You are a hot rodder.
Thank you.
That sort of dedication is in a hot rodder's DNA, as is the desire to create parts and invent tools that make it easier to keep a classic on the road.
While working on my 35 Packard, the gas tank had a leak. So I made a tool to fix it, and it dawned on me, hello, there's a need for this. And I call it the Sure Seat lapping tool. So what we're doing is coming in and lapping that in with a diamond dust head with the exact angle of the fitting. Therefore, we get a perfect seal on it. During that process, I had to fix a fitting. So I came up with the fitting fixer. If you have a damage on your fitting, the seal itself, you'll screw on this guide, and then you'll attach your lapping head to a 1/4-inch drill or 3-inch drill, come in here, spin it, and that refinishes the whole sealing surface of the fitting. With antique or vintage racing cars, especially, you have older fuel tanks, older lines, and older connections for all the plumbing. So that's where these will come in handy. They'll actually come in and give you a better seat. We've sold 60,000 Cool Tools, so they're doing a good job out there in the industry.
Stay with us, because when we return to Lime Rock Park, we'll have a chat with Le Mans winner and honored guest, Richard Atwood.
The Lime Rock Historic Festival 35 is being brought to you by Cool Tools, hose assembly and hardline sealing solutions, AP Laser, leading the way, and by Race Gas. Get more out of your engine.
Welcome back to the Historic Festival 35.
Lime Rock Park, a truly unique racing facility. I grew up in Massachusetts, and I've traveled to this track many times, not only as a spectator, but also to run here in a couple of my sports cars. So I thought I'd ask some of my fellow Lime Rock fans what it is about this place they like the most.
I've been coming here since I was probably 5 with my father. My uncle races.
Honestly, I think it's the family and the friends connections as much as it is the racing.
I've been at tracks all over the world, and this is one of the best and really one of my favorites.
You don't have any grandstands here, so you can just bring your chair and you can sit on the hill and see the races. It's really excellent.
It's just great scenery. It's a nice, quiet town.
I know a very competitive racer that's out here, so it was a great time coming out, knowing that you're going to see some good racing.
Watching the races, watching the cars, they're wonderful. I love the old cars.
I love Lime Rock Park because I get to see my dad race, and it's really cool seeing all of the historic
cars, and I love it here.
Well, I like the access to the vehicles itself. I really like to get down on all fours and get underneath the cars and check out the suspension, the mounting points. It's intimate.
There's great views of the track from all over the place.
And I do have a great Italian ice in my hand here, a couple beers earlier in the day, some good food out here. It's a blast coming out. It's my first time. I'll definitely be back.
This is really neat. This is a March 75B Atlanta car, and there are many people who believe that this was owned and raced by the great champion Gilles Villeneuve. Now, this competes in Formula Libre. It's Group 8, kind of a run-what-you-brung category. A lot of different cars in there, and the great legend around that class is back in 1959, the former Indianapolis 500 winner Roger Ward won that race in a midget car, beating some of the best drivers and best sports cars in the area. Well, there's a lot of action this year in Formula Libre. Let's take a look.
I remember there was Keke Rosberg and Villeneuve, and just everybody was crazy about Formula Atlantic back then. That was the series in North America if you wanted to get to Formula One. Back in that period, I was racing Formula Fords, and again, had ambitions as a young man to be a race car driver. It didn't pan out, but I kept my hand in it, and back in 1999, got back into vintage racing, and I've just found it to be just a wonderful way to really recall those great memories of the day. This is almost the ideal car for a track like Lime Rock because it's very quick, very nimble, handles extremely well. Before this car, I had a March Formula 2 car, which is very similar with a larger engine. And again, those small bore Formula cars are extremely, extremely effective on a great track like Lime Rock.
The Atlanta cars had the winning formula for 3 of the 4 races here this weekend. Rick Bell's Ralt RT1 had the hat trick, with only Ben Sinat's Lola T9190 standing between him and perfection.
This gentleman right here is going to be familiar to anybody who remembers the golden age of long-distance endurance racing. It's Richard Atwood. Great to see you here at the event. And just in case some of our viewers aren't familiar with your career, just tell us about some of the things that you accomplished behind the wheel.
Well, in the days, I was a 60s man. And in the 60s, you weren't contracted down to just one formula. You know, you could drive for anybody at any time. And so I drove in Formula One. Of course, I started with juniors, really, although before that at TR3A. Then I went to Formula 2, and Formula One I reached in 1965.
But Richard's biggest success was linked to the Porsche 917 and Le Mans.
In 69, I drove the first 917, the long tail. It was really a handful. It wasn't stable. So the following year, they had a short deck car, and it then became a fantastic car. And that is the year I won. And I nearly won in 71, finished second in that one. So I thought first, second, so we're going downhill, so I'm going to quit this game. And that's when I retired.
And you're getting a chance to run some laps in the Ford GT this weekend.
I was put in a category where I'm not challenged too much. And so the first race was okay, I won that one. And then there's a guy in a Spitfire, and he was annoying me because he's too fast. But I love it here. It's so well manicured. There's a lot of time spent here. The banks are natural. It's a wonderful place to see racing as well as go racing. And I love the track.
As Richard mentioned, he and the Collier GT40 and the Spitfire of David Gussack battled throughout the weekend in Group 9, with each driver recording a pair of victories. So that winds up our coverage of the Lime Rock Historic Festival 35. And we hope you enjoyed a look at some of the important and influential race cars that have been kept alive and active by their passionate owners. Racing at events like this is not fender-to-fender combat, but a way to pay tribute to the wide variety of machines across the spectrum of speed. Historic racing events are held all around the world. You should check them out. You won't be disappointed. I'm Bill Stevens. Thanks for joining us.